Welcome, sales professionals, to List and Sell Online, where we show you how, once you've got that foothold into the market, to turn what might be for you mediocre performance into peak performance, where you are, I guess, tapping your potential and doing what you're capable of rather than accepting what you think you might be able to have. This is an important recording. It's a little bit different. It's definitely very similar to the same thing I've been doing across all of our training channels this week, because this is the second last, the penultimate month of the year of the last quarter, which we've been banging on about as it relates to the first month being Rocktober. Rocktober sort of spawned itself out of Real Estate Rockstar in the early stages and has now developed so much so that when we look at the last month of the year, we look at October as Rocktober as a platform, or if you like, the bounce month, where you set yourself up to not only do the top run of productivity that you're capable of coming in to the last quarter, but also set yourself up so that when you come back from that, for many of you, what will be a well-deserved break, notwithstanding the fact that lockdown for a lot of us has presented a bit of a break, but you can then come back and take off, hit the ground running, as they say, and continue that productivity run all the way through the new year. And certainly before we finish this year out, I'll be talking to you in the next couple of weeks about how you set up or do what we refer to at the same level, at the top end level, set up an objection meeting where you figure out where it is that you want to go. And that kind of leads me to this very first point, as we talk about what for some of you might appear to be rather quirky in NOCEMBER. Now, how NOCEMBER came about starts with steam a long time ago. What I noticed in the last month of the year is that typically, as we head toward it, things start to slow down. And the dangerous thing, and before we even look at it from our perspective, let's just take a look at it from the perspective of our clients, which of course are property sellers, those that have been entertaining the idea. Now, the danger for them come next week, which Monday is the first of what you'll soon learn is NOCEMBER. And a lot of them, if they're out shopping or in department stores, they might even be doing Christmas shopping. But the moment they start to get in that mode or hear those Christmas carols, a lot of people start to talk about whatever it is, or any subject matter that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with leading toward Christmas Day and the break, as something they can delay till next year. And you certainly don't want them doing this in and around the property market if they do have a motive that you could satisfy before, and you just don't want to break down that productivity as you go in. This is why during October, this is why in really the last 4 or 5 recordings that I've had on here, the theme has constantly been about identifying and building your active property seller list, the APS list. And I've said that you want to get that to 25 plus, a minimum of 25. And this has fundamentally been because if you get those numbers, if you have that, whether it be an oversupply or not, you definitely have the opportunity to not only build the productivity you kind of require to get you through NOCEMBER and to the Christmas break, but certainly for setting up for listings for next year. Any less than that, I've got to tell you, you're in a spot of bother. That doesn't mean that you can't do something about that. This is the first time I've said this, and mainly because I shared this with a crew that I have on board over in New Zealand that we do. For them, it's 9 a.m. For me, it's 7 a.m. every week and has been for the last 6 or 7 weeks. I said to them, look, one thing you do need to understand, it doesn't matter what I talk about here, and I hope that you are indeed writing this down, and that is that it is never, ever too late to make a start, but except that sometimes it's too early to make a run for the line, to make a run to finish. So if you don't have the active property sellers, if your APS list is not up, or at the very least knocking on the door of about 25, you are, as I just said, in a spot of bother. Like, even in a perfect world, if you had, say, if you had lean numbers, let's say you had single figures, somewhere between 5 and 9 active property sellers on that list, well, you're still in a spot of bother, because only in a perfect world where you were able to list every one of those prior to and sell prior to Christmas, then you're a real chance at it. So if you're into single figures, your first priority still right now is focusing on how you build that list. When I say it's never too late to make a start, because if you don't focus on that active property seller list this very moment, not only are you headed for lean pickings this quarter, you are most certainly headed for even leaner pickings to start the new year. And if you're not careful, that will just have a flow-on effect. So despite everything I'm going to talk about here right now, one of the things that you need to do is very quickly assert yourself as to where you are around opportunities moving forward. Everything I'm going to say really has no weight if you do not have in control those active property sellers. Now, in previous recordings, I've talked very much about this. I've focused very much on, what you've got to do to build that list in and around prospecting. I spent a whole period of time making sure that that was very clear. I can give you a quick understanding of what you need to do about that in just a few moments. The first thing that I want to say is just the reason that we call it NOCEMBER is because we're basically going to get rid of December. My observation has been for a number of years that, somewhere between November, December, and January, a disaster normally strikes. Typically, it's around December being a lean month, or if it's ordinary, then January ends up being a lean month. It's mostly because people don't anticipate the down rush of having that big break in between. They don't disseminate about prospects, so they put too much energy into everything they've got to do in November. December's lean, but that's kind of stamps out or rubs out any good work that you do in December, in November. If you have a good November, that December is lean, it then cancels it out. And then we kind of forget about January and it gets all stuffed up. So the reality is, what we do is I've just gotten rid of December. I just meld that nicely into November. I am very verbose and very articulate about this, especially with prospective property sellers and those that I'm dealing with, making it clear to them and setting the parameters that we work all the way through to Christmas Eve this year being on a Friday, which is kind of ideal. So you say that you run the whole month of what we now call NOCEMBER up until Christmas Eve. Now, of course, you don't want to sound like the Christmas Grouch or something like that. So then again, I'm very quick to just say, listen, it's not that we won't be celebrating Christmas. I will be taking time out to enjoy the festive season, but that doesn't occur until the 25th. And until that occurs, I am flat out. In fact, my record for selling properties on Christmas Eve was 3. And, if you adopt this attitude, but in particular, if you share this attitude, especially with prospective sellers that you have on board, they will be attracted to the fact that you are quite happy to work in and around that. I then make it very clear, and what I'm making clear to you is, so we're going to run it all the way from the 1st of NOCEMBER, meaning it will have the best part of 50 days. So if you run it up until the 20th, which I think is the Tuesday, that indeed would be 50 days. And if you run it to, obviously, the 24th, that's basically 54 days. And I say that I'm on. So during that period, you are on mentally. I articulate the fact that I'm on. When I hit the Christmas break, I'll be off. The reason I run it to Christmas Eve is I like to come back around the somewhere between the middle of January. And that's another reason that I have to set it up, because then I'm going to take off from the 24th and not return until roughly about the 14th or 15th of January. Now, some of you might actually have that in a shorter period. Doesn't really matter when you start. Far be it from me to influence that. You know, if leaders, if you're sitting on here thinking I'm getting the whole team back on the 5th or the 1st or whatever it is, that's okay too. But all you have to know as an individual sales professional is that when you're in, yep, you're on. So I basically say I'm here for the whole of NOCEMBER and running all the way to that line. Now, if you've done the preparation, your APS list is up around 25, you are game on. If it's not, you're still going to be running all the way to the 24th, but your focus will be centric to prospecting, to building that APS list. And that is still entirely plausible, notwithstanding the fact that you're most likely going to get the majority of those sellers looking at coming on after Christmas. But that's okay too, because you want to start that run straight away. Now, if your APS list is below, is in single figures, and you are now have to focus on building that APS list, I wouldn't be coming back mid-January either. I'd be coming back the first day in January, so that you make sure that you do start the year with a bang and make it highly productive. But in any event, I'm sure you can see where we're going. So now, those of you that do have your APS list up, good news for you. We have the process. We have all the dialogue. There'll be lots of talk and discussion around that, and I'll show you how you get on top of it. So the very first thing that you do once you've got that list in play or not, again, I'll come back to this. If you are in a position where your APS list is, you know, in single figures, or maybe a bit better, might even be in the early teens, you do need to focus on prospecting. If you're knocking on the door around 20, you might just get away with it. So, you know, focus on what I'm about to share right after. But if you're below, I've got to tell you, this is the most important thing that I can share with you right now. Focus on, in order, building that list. And the first place to look is in and around sales inquiry. So if there is sales inquiry in the office, particularly that is at least 4 weeks of age, go back and start trawling through that using the dialogue that I've shared with you before. Remembering that if it's at least 4 weeks old, those active property sellers that are in there have had the time to do the research in the market and are probably going to be most receptive to the ideal of discussing putting their property on and making a move. So they should be okay with identification. So typically, here's how the call would go. I would ring one of those. Let's say it was an inquiry that came from someone attending an open for inspection. And let's say that inspection took place in September or late September. So I would call, I just say, first thing I do is, sorry to bother you. My name's Mark from Johnson Real Estate. Look, and then I state the nature of the inquiry. Look, you attended an open for inspection of ours at number 14 Stevens Place back in late September. Yeah. So mate, say that. And then I just say, have you purchased as yet? They then speak. I can't hear them the moment they stop speaking. I basically then say, do you have something to sell? Now, I'm speaking that quickly. They might say, what? I say, do you have something to sell? Now, if their response is, well, not at the moment, we need to find something first, bang, that's identification. That's an active property seller. Or if they say, and don't get all excited, don't start pushing for a presentation, just note that they've said that. If they say, well, we have to find something first, or if they then go on and say, you know, not at the moment, we're just looking, just trying to get an idea. So no plans whatsoever this side of this year. They still might be, and they still might, but all you're doing is saying, well, that's one that's going to be likely in the new year. So you're just trying to ascertain between the two. That's the first place to look. The second is in and around regeneration. If you do have listings in the office, really focus in, especially those that are new coming to market, around utilizing. Now, this is to do with some products that we have available, but utilize the sales trainer just listed card, which is called LA Woman. It's called LA Woman because it's completely different from any other just listed card that's out there. Basically, it goes out before you put the for sale sign up. It has no street number on there. It just says we've listed a property on Jones Street. Wanted the neighbors to be the first to know. If you're researching the market ahead of selling or want to know about this or any of our other pre-release listings, please call. So it names the street, it has no photograph, and there's no sign on it. Obviously, to an active property seller, they're going to want to know about it, so they call you up, and that's how you get them in. So focus on that regenerative. Definitely focus on a similar just listed that we use around the competition sign. This is called a PMBX, which stands for put the message in the box. And when one of your competitors lists a property, you get 50 of these cards done up and 50 houses immediately surrounding it. We put that just listed out, which mentions buyers and also gets them the call. I don't have time to go into how it works, just accept that it does. We then put an invitation in place to any of our open for inspections that they're coming out to. I'll come back to that in just a second. Remembering that that invitation has to note the PMBX, remembering that when the people do turn up, that you qualify. When they walk in, just say, "G'day, folks. My name's Mark from Johnson Real Estate. What are we doing today? Buying or selling?" Because for sellers, we have a property sellers research guide, which I'll mention in just a second. All of these are leverage components. If you have any other problems identifying how to get prospecting in place under the traction protocols, please look back to early editions in this in this series, the one on prospecting. But more importantly, just get in touch with me, and I'll be giving my name, my email address, contact email address, and my phone number at the end. And you're more than welcome to discuss this with me. Then you can go on to the just sold protocols that we've got. You've got to lift the inquiry up. I've covered this over and over again, but before you start worrying about your productivity numbers, you've got to increase the opportunities available to you. And this is only done by you identifying active property sellers, not conducting market appraisals to dormant property owners who will be doing something, but they may not be doing it for 2 or 3 years. You need to identify sufficient numbers of active property sellers that are selling either this quarter or next quarter. Now, once your list is up at around 25 active property sellers, we're still going to be replenishing that list as we move forward, because naturally, not everyone's going to list with you. Timing's not always going to fit in. So the more you have, the more opportunities you have, the more you list. The more abundance of opportunities you have, the less onerous it is on you to start thinking about, which you will. If you've got scarcity, you'll start to entertain fee discounts. You'll start to entertain the notion of concessions around marketing. And you want to totally avoid this. So abundance is the key. All right, so we've got our 25 active property sellers. In some cases, if you look at Ange Sorales and Stuart Hatfield, they started with 38, and that's steadfastly building. And as an offshoot, they've been getting even more. Their listings are flowing beautifully, and they are setting up nicely for next year because they're following this protocol and they're setting up the value proposition well before they ever get near the listing presentation. So the next port of call for you is to then focus on a dissemination of those active property sellers. There are going to be some that are going to fall into what we will refer to as the BC, which is the before Christmas sellers, and the others, which are going to be focusing on as the after Christmas sellers. Those, of course, are those that we'll be looking at in the January area. And this is naturally going to occur. Now, this is not a case of you just ringing up under interrogation. You're selling before Christmas, you're selling after Christmas. No, It's more about you deciding where they fit into this category. And most of that will be discerned through good conversation. As a first port of call, remembering this is not an interrogation. This is a conversation in which you are looking to discover information, not pry for that information. So what we want to ascertain is when in our discussions, and I've made this very clear in all of our previous training dispositions as it relates to prospecting and platforming before we get to the listing, or I say listing education instead of presentation. And that quite simply is this. First thing you want to know in and around the motive is what is that seller, what or where? So what are they trying to do or where are they trying to go? Make the conversation centric about that, get that out on the table. Now, let's just say as an example, they say, well, look, we're just looking for a bigger house very close by or in surrounding suburbs. And then I say, okay, hypothetically, if imagining that I had a buyer for your property at a level you're over the moon with right now with all the right terms and conditions, how would you feel about moving in prior to Christmas? Oh, that would be too soon, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so would you want to be able to, would you want to know on Christmas morning when you woke up that you've actually secured the new property, that yours is done and you're on the way to the next one? Yeah, that would be nice. Bang, before Christmas. Oh, yeah, sounds okay, but we would, but if we could do it, that would be great. But it sounds like a bit of the pie in the sky. Still, bang. They're in the before Christmas camp. And one that I'm going to be focusing on very heavily, particularly, even the way they shun it out. Oh, it would be nice, but if it has to be after Christmas, it has to be. For them, I want to get them on early, because if I can get them on the early part, they will play ball and I could get it all done. Now, if I said something like that and they said, look, doesn't matter to us, we haven't even really begun to look, I'm starting to think, okay, maybe they are after Christmas. Yep. Now, particularly if I then move to the second part of that motive and I start to push back on it when I'm looking and I'm saying, why would you want to do that? Are you really sure you want to do that? How does it feel? How would you feel if you weren't able to get that done? So expressing it negatively. Now, if they push back on it, they say, well, look, the reason we want to make the move now, we watch these prices go up and we're starting to realize if we don't do it now, we'll never get it done. To me, that's a before Christmas one. Yep. So you are just feeling it out to see which side of Christmas they are. Once we understand where they are, now we move back to what we discussed last week, which was our pre-list passive contact list. Those 9 contact points. I'll just go through them very, very quickly so that you do understand them. The property seller's research guide. So that's something that needs to be sent out. Now, I know if they've come to one of your welcome homes and you've offered that as a qualifier to see whether they're a seller, researching the market ahead of selling, and they've taken that, that's fine. You can then perhaps move to the electronic version. But if they have not received anything from you and you've now identified them as a seller, first thing that goes out is your property seller's research guide. If you don't have a property seller's research guide, if you're not a part of what we are doing with Property Marketer, then something that might be your pre-listing kit or something that gives a statement about the product and professional services that your company and or brand offers, that needs to go out to them almost immediately. Once that's out, we then move into putting them on what we call our SMS list, where you are texting them in real time your sales results, so there is evidence of people actually moving. This is very important as we're in the middle of NOCEMBER, because the more evidence that they're seeing of properties transact, despite the fact that we're almost on top of Christmas, the more they are encouraged to consider doing the same. That preliminary CMA, I was just explaining this, we've had unprecedented success with this, where you send out a preliminary comparative market analysis that does not have your opinion whatsoever of where the property sits on price. It's basically just the supply of information, and as the title suggests, a preliminary run. it goes out and it explains that it's just a subjective opinion, a benchmark, just wanted to give them an idea. And this forms a great platform for good discussion, which I will be going into in great detail next week when I start to talk about pampering all of these active property sellers when you've identified them and schmoozing them all the way to the listing presentation. The welcome home invitation. So you might have met them at an open home, so that's okay. But I still want to invite them to others where I am pointing out with a cover letter the distinct differences that we are offering with our welcome homes. We're treating them as a shop front, and how prospective purchasers will view their property because of that open for inspection. If there's no discernible difference between your open for inspection and that of your competitors, well, there's your first clue. It's your new shop front, so you need to be addressing that. I will be talking about that in later series. A little bit too late to be addressing it just before NOCEMBER, so you still got to send it out. But those of you that have got those differences, by sending out that invitation, even if they don't turn up, it is still fantastic passive contact. The next thing is the two-view website or some example of your marketing. Those subscribers to Property Marketer, you have this available to you. It's an offering that you can give to any prospective seller free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything to actually give them this. And basically, it's a subdomain that is accessed by that property's address. So direct contact for it. Loads of sellers like this. If you spread that out and show them what you get, it is yet another offering that you have that maybe your competitors do not. The Market Roundup is the next one. So we're up to number 6. The Market Roundup is your newsletter, which tells them how the market is, what sales are occurring, which allows them to glean what their property might be worth, and then smatter that with accolades, which coincidentally is number 7. Your recommendations, these need to be sent out. Now, if you are looking at this from the active property seller's disposition, even if they're thinking about putting it off before Christmas, you're sending them a PSRG, you're sending them information about sales that have been made in real time. You've given them information about where their property sits in a preliminary manner inside that CMA for comparative value, inviting them to welcome homes, and they're seeing these in action. They're getting the two-view websites and seeing what one of those all looks like. From their perspective, this adds up to real value. This adds up to real service. It is completely, has a direct correlation to you. And then, of course, you're conversing with them every day. The next one, of course, is the Property Marketer case studies, where we're showing marketing products, how they work and how they sit in. Again, if you package these up inside the listing presentation, which is the platform for training, moving forward, certainly into the early part of the new year, where we'll show you that if you package your marketing products and make it easier for people to buy rather than you having to sell them, then they start to cooperate and do just that. And then last but by no means least was specific buyers that you're actually by name, showing the buyers that you have for their property should they bring their property into the market. And this negates the ideal where some of them think that agents ask for money to find buyers. Shouldn't they already have them? Well, you're showing that you do and they can perform. And it doesn't dilute the marketing proposition. In fact, I believe it strengthens it, especially when you get there to explain it. Now, if all that's going on, all that's now left to you, once you've disseminated the before and the afters, what you do naturally with those that are before, we expedite, we speed up the time taken to deliver those 9 steps, and we up the frequency of communication. Those that you are certain of falling into next year, we'll spread those a little bit out, still all occurring inside of NOCEMBER, but we're gearing those to list maybe at the end of NOCEMBER with the idea of going live as soon as we come back in January, or at least list in January. So it becomes a little bit more protracted. So by knowing which ones are before, you can put your energy into those now, and knowing which ones are after, you put your energy into those now, all the while lifting the number of active property sellers you're engaging with. And what's the net result? NOCEMBER gives you a fantastic 12-week month. Now, Importantly, and I didn't mention this, the only thing you have to be totally aware of is that you set the destination, which is your goal. Your goal for NOCEMBER needs to be at least 1.5 times what it typically is. So whatever you are planning to do or setting yourself as a goal to achieve in listings and sales for November, multiply it by 50%, and that should be your goal. And that this needs to be conservative because goals are mandatory. Your target can be higher than that because targets are aspirational. Remembering a target is something you can take aim at, get close to. You might miss it, but you might get close to it and everyone says it's good, but that's still not hitting it. Goals are different. They are mandatory. You must hit them. For that reason, they need to be conservative. Make sure you set the goal before you start the journey. Know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you can't halfway say, well, how far have we got to go, or how far have we come? It's most important that you're on top of that. All right, I hope that all makes sense, because next week I'll start to move into what you do and say with these active property sellers when you are talking to them, particularly as what you're saying to the befores is a little bit different to what you're saying to those afters. If your active property seller list is not up to scratch, a reminder to engage in all of the prospecting protocols to lift it up. Remembering, and that's the theme of this month, that it is never too late to make a start, but it is sometimes a little early to call it a finish. Yep. And next week we will be talking in session, I've got to think now, will be 15 or 16, one of the two, is basically pampering. We'll be talking about what you do and say to engage those active property sellers. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can reach me on Mark with a K at salestrainer.com.au, or you can reach me on mobile +61 410 592 165.